Okay, good morning. Chris, good to be with you today
Good morning.
on this day of COVID-19 continued madness, shock, and awe. Um, I was kind of wondering if we should go through with this conversation today, given kind of how much is on everybody's mind and on our mind. But then I thought, well, there's a lot of stress out there right now, and we're all living in close quarters at home, and a lot of pressure in businesses naturally. So, maybe a conversation like this might be useful for times like these. And here we are. And the topic for today is healing in partnerships. And it's a topic that, I chose because it's kind of it's very present in my awareness right now, and based on what's happening in my own relationships. And I'll get more into that a little bit later. But in business partnerships, I feel, Chris, like there's disagreements are inevitable, right? Strong disagreements, passionate disagreements, seeing things differently, having different ideas about how to proceed with things, and different ideas about work habits and standards and expectations and how things, all of that is just inevitable. Just people have different views and ideas and approaches and styles and so forth. But what isn't inevitable is suffering, emotional suffering, the strife and strain and stress that often accompany our interactions in our closest and most important and most intense relationships. And it's that kind of emotional strife that hey, Terrence, welcome to the conversation. I'll kind of backtrack just a little bit, so that since it's close to the conversation, I was just getting started, and what I was sharing with Chris is in business partnerships and in our close relationships, there's disagreements are kind of inevitable. Like, people have different ideas about how things should be done, styles and ways of doing things, and standards and expectations. I mean, two people are just going to have a fair amount of differences in that regard. But what is not inevitable in partnerships is suffering, is the emotional strife and stress and strain that kind of often accompanies our experience in our closest and most intense and important relationships. And so that's really, it's that layer of emotional strife and suffering that that really is the kind of what we're spotlighting in this conversation today. And healing, the topic of the title of the call is healing in partnerships. And healing, I think, is the term that I'm using for the experience that we have where kind of emotional strife and suffering dissolves, it dissipates. And I thought it would be nice to share what I have seen about that, and um, then have a conversation about that. Um, so so here's what I've seen about how suffering dissipates, um, and how it dissipates within the context of relationships. What I have seen is that suffering dissipates as understanding comes into our awareness. We, we there's this faculty or thing that occurs as we reflect upon events or people or conversations where, as we gain a deeper kind of deeper understanding, uh, that understanding recontextualizes things, and that recontextualization like leads to uh, like greater empathy and greater compassion and greater wisdom and a perspective on things that is the experience of healing. So I was trying to think of some examples of this, of what I'm talking about, that I think can make this more tangible. And I thought of a couple. Like, one of them is like, how, I don't know if you guys have had this experience of, like, let's say some event in our lives where we felt a lot of regret, like, oh God, I can't believe I did that. I was so whatever it is, like, some huge mistake you made, and then, like, time goes by, you think about it again, and you think, like, I was just young, I just didn't know any better at the time. I mean, I was just at where I was at, and that understanding, it's like that deeper understanding you gain, like this perspective that, where you see it from a bigger picture, and you see, like, there's this really impersonal course of events that's happening, and from that point of view, forgiveness comes in, and compassion comes in, and understanding kind of comes in, and you don't look back on yourself with that same kind of harshness, and that's kind of like what I'm pointing to here. And there's, so many examples of that just happen all the time. Uh, like I remember there was a period of time where I was so, fixated on my parents and their shortcomings, and, like, all the things all the things that they could and should have done differently, and then, but then over time, like, I kind of, I got to know and understand, like, what their own parents were like, and kind of like what they were up against, and what their inner world was like when they were going through what they were going through, and even today what they, and then, so it's like, as I've as my understanding of them has kind of deepened, uh, the rancor and strife that I felt in my relationship with them has softened, and it's kind of, with, it's like, with understanding, there's this way in which our common innocence and our common humanity comes to the forefront, and the common humanity becomes more of our felt experience, and the strife of our differences becomes lessened, by it, by understanding. And I feel like in in relationships, so when it comes to like other people, we see other people and our partners, and they're acting in ways that where they're obviously like triggered or activated, or maybe they're acting in ways that we're triggered and activated, right? And our we're just kind of in it. Our partner's in it, we're in it, we're both in it, um, and it's like, the feelings and emotions around that are so strong and so intense, and uh, one of the things that we continually talk about in co-founder dynamics is how those feelings are kind of um, like a pointer to us, to go inward, like to a pointer to that it's that it that it's that there's an opportunity for reflection in that area, for deeper understanding. Like it's it's kind of like um, it can be seen as just an opportunity in our relationships, to go inward in the direction of kind of gaining understanding, uh, so as to, well, actually, I don't even know that we need more. We need a kind of ulterior motive, uh, or destination. I think that gaining understanding by itself is a worthy direction for us to be, uh, engaged in. It's helpful. It's, kind of comforting, and ultimately, um, very, kind of productive and healing. It's like in the relationship work that, that couples therapists and relationship experts talk about. A lot of what they talk about has to do with like, what they call boundaries. And I think that, uh, people, at least for me, I think the kind of colloquial understanding of a boundary is like kind of protecting a protective sort of shield against others. And but as I've learned more about what is actually meant by boundaries, healthy boundaries, I've seen it's a bad term. It's not the correct. I think it's a misleading term, because really what is spoken of when it comes to boundaries is the experience of your partner sharing their inner world, like what they're feeling, what they're thinking, how they see things, and me being able to listen to that in this and creating a neutral space to kind of hear that, take it in, uh, and understand it, without needing to respond to it, without needing to defend myself, without needing, to kind of, uh, disagree or add a caveat. It is just to be that neutral space of listening, with the idea of seeking and knowing and understanding my partner. Okay, so that is an experience of me having healthy boundaries. It's very different than what I ever imagined. Because unhealthy boundaries is like your partner sharing their world, and me, my partner sharing, their world, and then me getting all caught up in my reactions. And look, that happens, right? But it's kind of important to kind of see what's going on there, like that, you know, our reactions aren't necessarily, they're ours. And what we can do for our partners is set those aside. Set those aside and be the neutral space, and seek understanding, and knowing. And especially when our partner is in it and activated and having obviously in a tough space, and in those moments it's real tough for us to be the neutral ground, right? And that's the work, that's the sort of that's the work for us, and that is the process of becoming a good partner. And and look, likewise, it would be ideal if our partner were, kind of on that same learning curve, and we're able to provide that same neutrality and desire for understanding and that listening. And but I guess the paradox around that is that the thing that we can kind of most do to help our partner be that is to be it ourselves, model it ourselves, move in that direction, and really just make requests, just make requests, like, hey, I would appreciate it if you could just kind of hear me out and just listen to what I'm saying, and just take it in, and those kinds of requests. And it's, these conversations that we have in this context that I'm talking about, where we're learning about each other's inner world, and our inner thoughts and perspectives and ideas, they're so productive. They're unbelievably illuminating and productive. It's like there's something about being in that kind of impersonal space that kind of frees up the creative capacity of mind to come up with fresh perspectives and ideas, and just issues and struggles can drop away and solutions can come forward. And it's just a very dynamic and productive and positive space to be in. But it's interesting, it's because it's not even from efforting that happens. It's not from trying that occurs. It's just from, in a sense, an absence of trying, and a dropping into that reflective, neutral space where sort of pure potentiality comes out more freely, I would say, so yeah, I think that was really, kind of, that was it in terms of what I've seen around this and the direction that I wanted to point people in. And I don't know, Chris, what do you kind of get where I'm pointing? And
Yeah. I thought, the kind of example of the parental relationship is really interesting. That's something that I've noticed kind of popping up in a lot of conversations with my peers of late. People are seeing their parents in themselves, or they're seeing their grandparents and their parents, and kind of grappling with childhood trauma and ways that they didn't get their needs met, and these kinds of things. And a lot of times what I've kind of noticed from people is the healing isn't coming because the relationship is changing. The healing is coming because their beliefs about the relationship are changing.
Right. Yeah.
And that is kind of, I think, really what this kind of like neutral space and this, bringing understanding to a relationship. You're putting your judgment outside. You're kind of letting go of whatever attachments existed, and bringing that, to understand, you have to be curious. You can't have, and once that kind of aha moment can happen, oh, this is why they did that. They have their own story or thing happening. You can kind of let go and say, oh, it's not about me at all. I can now show up for this person without these old beliefs.
Yeah, that's exactly that's exactly my experience, and that kind of that letting go event, that inner letting go that happens. It seems to kind of create the space, not that I don't know that we necessarily have control over when we let go, and like, our ability to let go, I don't know exactly how that works. There's a kind of bit of mystery to that, but I do see it as playing like this really, really wonderful part in kind of alleviating the our experience in relationships, and I see that, like, like in like 12-step programs where like where step number one is kind of like this surrender to a higher power.
Mm-hmm.
That's it. That's like the entire foundation of the of healing is that what in the 12 steps they call the surrender to a higher power. It's like we need to let go, right? And then the rest of the journey is this process of reflection. It's looking at ourselves and taking our inventory, and like it's all this like facilitating of deeper understanding, and then listening to other people as they gain understanding, and share their own reflection, and then in that space of reflection, there's the like that common humanity comes out, and that's healing.
Yeah.
Healing. It's like we all come into this greater and greater awareness of our basic innocence and our basic commonality. It's like we're all in this shitstorm together.
How apt is that in this moment of being together? Another thing I was thinking about with this, there's this really great phrase I like from Paul. He says something to the effect of sin is like kicking against the pricks. And that motion is really like self-inflicted. The pricks aren't doing anything to you. You're kicking. You're the one that's like injuring your own foot. And I think about that a lot in these, conversations where people are really holding on to their beliefs and their need to be right. It's hard to do in the moment to kind of just stop that kicking motion and say, hold on, what's going on? But that's like a prereq for the healing to happen. Like we have to stop hurting ourselves by holding on.
Yeah, I know, and and I think it is again like kind of mysterious in terms of like how we wake up to that, like how we wake up to our own need to be right, and the ways in which we're kind of creating the strife that we're complaining about. It's like invisible to us until it isn't, and what makes it go from invisible to us to like suddenly something that comes into our awareness. I feel like that to me is a little kind of it's above my pay grade, so to speak. I don't know the answer to it. I just know, like, we can talk about it and say, yeah, I kind of see this, and then we can be it. And then I think in being it, there's maybe, some possibility that those around us can see something new for themselves, and then be it themselves. And and that learning curve, I call it the learning curve, as my mentor George um, kind of talked a lot about that. Like that, um, kind of understanding that we're not perfect in relationships, um, but in the natural course of things, if we stay open and reflective, and really even if we don't stay open or reflective, it's like in the natural course of things, we learn, we
Hmm.
learn, we get, we gain wisdom and experience, and that helps us ideally. And being aware that we're on that journey can be a kind of balm as well. Like, it doesn't have to be perfect. I don't have to be, and my partner doesn't have to be. And if we fight and fall down and stumble and get into it, and you know don't behave perfectly, well, that's part of it too.
Yeah.
Pick ourselves back up and reflect on what happened, and reflect on, well, why is it that we got into that fight, and why is it that I was so charged up and activated? What is it about myself that you know just and that whatever it is that helps us in gaining that reflective orientation, that orientation towards understanding, and whatever helps us, I mean, could be books and going to therapy or walks or conversations with friends. I mean, whatever it is, I mean, it could come from anywhere, it can come from anywhere.
Totally.
Yeah.
Yeah, those and there, I've found that those stumbles and falls don't have to be these like really big intense things. Like there can be a lightness to it. I saw some friends who were older, maybe 20 years older than me. They were having a conversation about their anniversary, and in like very scripted format, the husband couldn't remember, and it turned into this little fight, but it was also like done with a lot of lightness. Like, oh, you did it again. How could you do that again? We're kind of ribbing each other. I'm like, okay, that's not bad. That's not a bad way to do this. Instead of it being this like, how dare you? How dare you not see me? It's like, okay, we've been here before. I've seen you do this. I'm going to call you out and just kind of have a little fun with it.
Yeah, that's, look, that's really nice, and I feel like, what, that is a good that's a good example of like what healing looks like, like uh probably that conversation earlier in their relationship was not so lighthearted.
Probably, yeah.
But they've kind of
Leave on the couch.
they gotten to know each other. They gotten to like understand each other's foibles and blind spots, and so like it's that enhancement of like understanding that you know um, enables or like creates a sort of softness and humanity around the whole conversation. And it keeps it, that's why they're able to have a more lighthearted tone, because they have that going for them.
Totally.
And that's kind of like how do we get that going for us in our work relationships, and I don't really think it's that different of a process. I think like um we're just talking about, we might be talking about in the professional context how people are thinking and feeling about stuff at work, um, uh, and stuff in the business. And but the humanity of us is going to come into play there as well. But I mean, in general, it's the same idea. It's the same experience. Um, that it's the same thing, that A causes strife and suffering, and B, leads in the direction of healing and wellness and
Mm-hmm.
healthy dynamic relationships. So let me pause to see if there are any other questions or any observations. Well, good then. Let's wrap up here. Wonderful to talk, and till next time.
Yeah, let's head back into that storm.
Okay. Have a good one.